morning, everyone.
Good morning. Okay.
Thank you, Eliezer.
Okay.
We are in Maseches Shekalim, Perek Aleph, and we're in Mishnah Hey. We've learned about Rosh Chodesh Adar being the day that the announcement was made for everyone to get their Machzis HaShekel to the Beis HaMikdash by Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that's the yesod of the whole Masechta. By Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Machzis HaShekel had to be collected because the animals that will be brought for the public offerings, the Korban Tamid, the Korban Musaf, beginning the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, those animals must be purchased with the new collected money. Money that was left over from last year's Machzis HaShekel. We'll learn later in the Masechta what was done with that. But the collection, the process started 30 days in advance. People were notified Rosh Chodesh Nisan on the 15th day, on Rosh Chodesh Adar to get their money by Rosh Chodesh Nisan. On the 15th day of Adar, the Shulchanos, the money changers, opened up the tables by Medina. And on the 25th of Adar, they opened up the Shulchanos in the Mikdash. And we learned the Machlokas Rashi Rambam. Rashi learns Medina means outside the Beis HaMikdash, meaning the city of Yerushalayim. And Mikdash means the Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam learns Medina means anywhere outside Yerushalayim. And Mikdash means the entire city of Yerushalayim. We learned yesterday the different people that are mechuyev in the Machzis HaShekel. We learned the three shitos. They are on page 6 of your Mishnah Behira. We read the chart at the bottom of page 6. The Tanakama, obviously a Yisrael, Ger, etc., are mechuyev to bring a Machzis HaShekel. Women, Avodim, Kenanim, for the way we learned the Mishnah right now, men under the age of 20 are not mechuyev on Machzis HaShekel. And that's how we paskin, although there were other shitas. Ben Bukhari held that Shevet Levi and the Kohanim did not have to bring a Machzis HaShekel, but if they wanted to, they could. The Kohanim personally had their own drasha that they were not permitted even to bring a Machzis HaShekel. We don't paskin like that. We don't paskin like Ben Bukhari. We paskin like the Chachamim, that Kohanim, Shevet Levi, are mechuyev to bring a Machzis HaShekel. Kohanim get a dispensation. If they don't bring the Machzis HaShekel, we don't forcibly collect it. The forcible collections began on the 25th of Adar. We don't forcibly collect from Kohanim because of the rule of Chelef Avodasam. The Torah says that the Kohanim Azoche, for example, in Truma, as Chelef Avodasam, in exchange for the work they do in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, this Kohen who didn't bring his Machzis HaShekel, he has a Machzis HaShekel extra in his pocket that really belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. And Beis Din is masna. Beis Din has the power to make conditions on these issues. And they made a condition that a Kohen that doesn't bring his Machzis HaShekel, it's in his pocket, it's Chelef Avodasam, it's additional pay for the work he does in the Beis HaMikdash. So halacha is that the Leviim, the Kohanim, are required to bring a Machzis HaShekel. However, if the Kohen doesn't bring it, you're not mamashkin him, you don't forcibly collect it. So now we're in Shekalim, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey, and that's on page 6 of your Mishnah Behira. Afal pi she'amru, even though we have said, ein mamashkinim noshim va'avodim uktanim, that you don't forcibly collect Machzis HaShekel from women. Evet Kanani, we discussed the difference. There's an Evet Ivri, a born Jew who sells himself as a servant, either because he needs the money or because Beis Din sold him as a result of him stealing things for which he can't repay, so they sell him into servitude. That's not who we're talking about. Such an Evet is a regular Jew. We're talking about an Evet Kanani, a Gentile slave, servant who was purchased and he has, so long as he's a slave, he has the halachas of a woman, a Jewish woman, and he's mechuyev in mitzvahs of a Jewish woman. So even though we've already stated that you cannot forcibly collect from women an Evet Kanani or a katan, again, until we get further in the Masechta and discuss this, we're dealing with a young man who's under the age of 20, because in the parsha of Kisisa, of the parsha Shekalim, it says, Kala over ala pkudim ben esim shana v'mala. Anyone that passes over the counting from 20 years and above, and therefore this shita holds any young man below the age of 20 is not mechuyev b'machzis shekel. So women, Evet Kanani, men under the age of 20, they are not required to give a machzis shekel, and therefore you can't forcibly collect it because they're not required to give it in the first place. Im shaklu makabla miyadam. If they do want to give a machzis shekel, the Beis Hamikdash, the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, is allowed to take it from them. We discussed this issue yesterday. If a person is required to give a machzis shekel, it's a debt. He owes it to the Beis Hamikdash. To the extent that a person that's required to give that machzis shekel, and pay that debt, if he doesn't pay the debt, you send the debt collectors out to collect it. So there's no issue about whether he's repaying it wholeheartedly or not repaying it wholeheartedly. It's irrelevant. He's paying a debt. Let's go to a regular situation of a lender and a borrower. The borrower, the time comes, the borrower is required to pay back the loan. Let's say it's 50 shekel. The borrower has a loan. He's required to repay the 50 shekel. He doesn't repay it. They go to a din Torah. The Beis Din says you have to repay it. He doesn't repay it. There's a collection process by which Beis Din can collect that 50 shekel. When Beis Din collects that 50 shekel, Beis Din is not concerned about whether the borrower is paying it back happily, he's paying it back unhappily, he really wants to do it, he doesn't want to do it, it's half-hearted, it's full-hearted, it doesn't make a difference. He's paying a debt. The same thing is true if a person is required to pay the machzis shekel, he is repaying a debt. The debt collectors go and get it beginning the 25th day of Adar if he doesn't pay it. So we don't care about what he thinks and what he believes and what's in his heart and how good-hearted he is. But a person that's not mechuyev b'machzis shekel, he doesn't have to give it. And if he gives it, now we have a problem. If he doesn't wholeheartedly donate it to the tzibur, he doesn't wholeheartedly donate it to the Beis Hamikdash, we end up now with a certain percentage, whatever it is, 0.0000000001 of the Jewish collection of the machzis shekel, where there's this slight amount of money that's in the collection that wasn't given wholeheartedly, and therefore the reason that it's still in the Beis Hamikdash treasury is because it's a personal donation. Again, when you're dealing with a debt, you collect it. Doesn't make a difference what the person's thinking. When you're dealing with a nedava, it's a sort of a gift. Then the gift has to become public money. We have to be able to convert private money to public money. There's a good way to say it. When we're collecting the machzis shekel from someone that's required to pay machzis shekel, we are collecting a debt. When we collect a debt, we don't care what the person thinks and why he wants to give it or whether he wants to give it or not. He's paying a debt. On the other hand, when a person is not required to pay the machzis shekel, he's giving a private donation. We have to make sure that that private money is converted into public Klal Yisrael money, because private money is not permitted to be part of the machzis shekel collection. We have to buy karbanos that are part of the public offering in the name of the entire Jewish nation. If someone has 0.0000, whatever it is, in there, which remains his private money, that he's decided in his benevolence to give to the Beis HaMikdash, we have a problem, because now we've mixed a private korban with a public korban. So therefore, there's this question of Mose Yafa Yafa. Can the person give it over with such a complete heart to the treasure of the Beis HaMikdash that he's converted his private money into public money, although there was no debt that required him to do so? That's called the Chazal Masa Yafa Yafa, giving it over very, very well. We gave the example yesterday of Korach. Rashi brings down the name of Chazal, Al Teifen El Menchasam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Ribono Shel Olam, don't take any part of their offering. And the Chazal tell us that a Korach, and remember, Korach is a Levi, so this would sort of prove that Shita that holds Levium have to give Machzis HaShekel. But at any rate, assuming that there was Machzis HaShekel in the Midbar, and assuming that a Korban Tamid was brought in the Midbar, all not 100%, but assuming that a Korban Tamid was brought in the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Ribono Shel Olam, please, when today's karbanos, public offerings, are consumed, leave a tiny whatever speck of meat left on the maracha that we learned about in Maseches Tamid, and don't allow the fire to consume that meat, and let that represent the piece of carbon that was purchased from the 0.0000 whatever it is of Korach and his folks, to prove that you are not accepting their offerings. So this is a very rigid rule. The Korban Tamid must be purchased with public money. There can't be any part of private money in there. And Korach is a perfect example. Moshe Rabbeinu said, deny them their partnership in the Korban Tamid, leave their piece of the Korban Tamid on the Mizbeach. It's a very rigid rule. We cannot have what a person believes to be his private money in the Korban Tamid, which is a public offering. So now the question is, a woman, Eved Kanani, a boy, a young man that's under 20, he's not required to give the Korban Tamid. He's not required to give a Machzis HaShekel. Can he give a Machzis HaShekel? Do these people have the ability to completely convert their private money so that is 100% public money without any thoughts about, this is my private donation. It's no longer a private donation, it became public money. Masar, Yafa, Yafa. To the extent, if you remember yesterday, we learned on page 5 of the Mishnah Behira, Ben Buchri's made a statement that a Kohen, Kol Kohen Sheshokel, Eino Chote, a Kohen who wants to give the Machzis HaShekel is not considered a sinner. Now, why would you consider him a sinner? Why does Ben Buchri have to say that a Kohen who gives a Machzis HaShekel is not considered a sinner? For this very reason, because a Kohen who's not required to give the Machzis HaShekel, he has no debt here. The question is, if he gives the Machzis HaShekel not wholeheartedly, he now has basically ruined the Korban Tamid because there's private money in the Korban Tamid which there's not allowed to be. So Ben Buchri says you don't have to worry about this. A Kohen who is not required to give the Machzis HaShekel, you can take it from him and he won't be a sinner. He will convert the money into, he'll convert his private donation to be fully 100% public money. Again, we don't paskin like Ben Buchri. We paskin that the Kohanim are, in fact, required to give a Machzis HaShekel, but we don't forcibly collect it from them. So this is the issue our Mishnah raises on page 6. Even though we lay down the rule that women, Eved Kanani, young men under 20, you would not forcibly collect the Machzis HaShekel from them, which means that they're not required to give the Machzis HaShekel. Im Shaklu, if, however, they did bring the Machzis HaShekel to the Beis HaMikdash, Mekabel miyadam, you're allowed to take it from them. because we can teach them how to be moise yafa yafa. We can explain to them that we're very, very happy you're donating this money. It's not required of you, but in order for us to accept this money, you have to be moise it yafa yafa. You have to give it to the Beis HaMikdash with such an intention that it's not a private donation. It loses its status as private, and you're giving it over to be public money as if it was a debt. So we can accept the money from these people. Hanochri, a goy, vahakusi, and a kusi. If you remember when we learned Sefer Malachim, the kusim came from Kuta. They were Gentiles who were brought in a population exchange by the Assyrian king. When the Assyrian king sent the northern kingdom into exile, what the Assyrian kings did, in fact, the Gemara calls it Bilbel Eskol Ha'umais. The Assyrian king came and mixed up the whole world population. We don't know who's who anymore, except for Jews who have yichus. But for example, there's a prohibition of Ammon, Moab. Ammon and male Ammonites and male Moabites cannot convert to Judaism. The Gemara has a question if that prohibition is still intact, because nobody knows who's from Ammon and Moab anymore. Because boss Sancheriv will bilbil eskol ha'umos. Sancheriv, the Assyrian king, his process of thought was, I'm going to take the nations that I conquer, remove its population. So I conquer two nations, A and B. I take population B, I put it in country A. I take country A population and put it in country B. I mix up everyone all over the place so that no one feels like they're at home. People, while they're at home, even if you conquered the country, they get crazy ideas like revolting against the new king who doesn't belong there. So what you do is, you get rid of these crazy, quote-unquote, revolutionary ideas. You uproot people, put them in a strange land where they're uncomfortable. Right? This is what we talked about yesterday. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable in Golus. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable in Golus. You are supposed to feel uncomfortable in Golus. To the extent that you don't feel uncomfortable in Golus, the Rebbeinu Shalom sends certain things every so often, as the Meshech Chochmah, the Or Sameach, explains. The Rebbeinu Shalom will have to send certain things to make sure you feel uncomfortable in Golus. So the way Sancheriv made people feel uncomfortable in exile was moving them to different places, because when you're not in your home, you don't feel comfortable. Different place, different street names. You can't read the street signs. You don't know really the language. You're not used to the culture. And people are just, people go into a survival mode. I don't feel comfortable here, and I just want to survive. When people turn into survival mode, they're not thinking about how can we get together and upend and revolt against the king. So Sancheriv was Mavalbul Kol Ha'umos. When he destroyed the northern kingdom here in Eretz Yisrael, he took the Jews and sent them to different countries, and he brought a whole group of people from Kuta, Kuthians, and brought them to the northern kingdom. And they lived there. And eventually, at some point, whether right away or slightly thereafter, we're told in Sefer Malachim that lions came out of everywhere and started killing these Kuthians. These Kuthians were idol worshippers, and these lions came out and they were killing the Kuthians because this is, the Pasuk says, this is the land of Elokei Ha'oretz. This is God's land. And although Jews who worshipped Avodah Zarah here were exiled, because the land won't tolerate it and God won't tolerate it, when the Kuthians brought their idol worship here, it was completely not tolerable. And the Rebbeinu Shalom sent lions to punish the Kuthians. The next part of the story is that the Kuthians converted to Judaism to save their lives. So there was a point where we didn't know what to do with these Kuthians. Were they sincere converts? Were they only converting out of fear of the lions? So there was a machlokes in the Gemara whether the Kuthians are gerei emes, they are true sincere converts and have the rule of Jews, or they gerei aroyos, they are converts because of lions and are insincere converts and have the din of goyim. This debate went on in the Gemara for some time. The Kuthians gerei emes or gerei aroyos. Finally, the Gemara tells us in Chulin that an investigation was done, and they found on their mountains where the Kuthians live, they found all kinds of avodah zarah, and they realized that they were insincere converts because they're still worshiping idols. It's a whole sugya about kusim. And sometimes the Gemara will have a contradiction. Gemara in Brachos, in the 7th parak of Brachos, has a contradiction about whether you can count Kuthians for certain things or can't count them. And the Gemara says it's not a contradiction because one place where we said they can't be counted is before we found the avodah zarah on their mountains. And where it says they can't be counted, it's after we found the avodah zarah on their mountains. So this is the situation with the Kuthians. So the Mishnah here says, Nochri v'hakusi sheshaklu, a goy and a kusi who want to donate a machtas shekel, ein makabla miyodam, we don't accept it from them. We're going to soon see why. Obviously, we're not going to give a goy. A goy is kind of simple, and a kusi is really kind of simple. We're not going to give them. It's the Jewish public offering in the Beis Hamikdash. We're not going to give goyim the opportunity to donate. Even if he can give the money, yafa, goyim are not going to have a share in the Jewish karbonos. Now, a goy, ish, we learn out from the pasuk in Vayikra, a goy can bring certain private karbonos to the Beis Hamikdash if he'd like, but he can't be part of any donation to do any part of the public karbonos. So we don't take machtas shekel from a goy, we don't take it from the Kuthians. Ein makabel mehem. Now, once we're talking about Kusiim and Goyim, the Mishnah gives us additional rules about Karbonos. Ve'ein makabla miyodam kine zovin, ve'kine zovos, ve'kine yoldos, ve'chatos v'ashomos. This is talking now about Kuthians. Azov, Azova, a man who saw a certain flow from his body, which is called Zav, a woman that saw a flow from her body, which is in the Yud Aleph Yom, Bein Nida Lenida, different type of halacha, more stringent than Nida. So Kuthian women or Kuthian men that became Zav or Zavot, in order to become ritually pure again, you had to bring, on page 7, you have a picture of a pigeon. They had to bring kine zovin v'kine zavos. They had to bring certain kinds of dove, pigeon, in order to become cleansed from the impurity of zav, zava. Or a Kuthian woman who gave birth, she too has to bring such an offering. Obviously, Goyim would not bring such an offering altogether because there's no such thing as personal ritual impurity for a goy. It doesn't exist. Ritual impurity exists only for a Jew. The question is, what about a kusi? A kusi can become ritually impure. Now the question is, when the kusi comes to the Beis Hamikdash, or the female kusi comes to the Beis Hamikdash and says, here are my pigeons for my zav, my zava, my childbirth, we don't accept it from the Kuthians. And here Chazal's logic was that as long as the Kuthians remain ritually impure, Jews will not mingle and have any relationship with them. And we don't want Jews to mingle with Kuthians. They're Ovdei Avodah Zarah. Therefore, if the Jews know that Kuthians are presumptively tamei because they can't become ritually pure from these things because they can't bring their carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. Jews in those days who were concerned about ritual purity, they would stay away from the Kuthians. And mission accomplished. We don't want Jews having any kind of relationship with the Kuthians. So we don't accept these kind of karbanos from the Kuthians. Obviously, goyim, it doesn't make a difference. They can't become ritually impure. V'chatos, v'shomas, or korban chatos, or korban oshin is not accepted either. Avol, however, nedorim unedavos, private offerings. The difference between a neder and a nedava. A neder, there are two types of way a person can bring a carbon. A person says, Harei Olai, or Harei Zu. And this is halachas in Nedorim and Nedavos. There's a whole separate sugya about neder and nedava. In one case, a person says, Harei Zu. A person's looking at an animal and says, this animal shall be a carbon olah. If that animal dies before you can bring it as a carbon, you're not chayiv to replace it because you said, Harei Zu, this is the carbon. If that died, you don't have to replace it. You're not chayiv in the achrayas. You're not responsible for it if it dies. Sometimes a person will say, Harei Olai, I take it upon myself to bring a carbon olah. He must bring a carbon olah, even if the animal he finally picks for the carbon olah dies, he has to buy another one, because he didn't say this animal is the olah, he said it's upon me to bring an olah, and until he brings the olah, he hasn't satisfied his obligation. But those are private karbanos. So if a person, a goy, says, Harei Zu olah, or Harei Olai olah, he walks to the Beis Hamikdash, and then we know where he can go to, right? We learned in Masechta Midas how far a goy can go onto the Har Habayis. That's why the soreg, that little fence, was built around the chayil. A goy can go on the Har Habayis. He can't go past the soreg, past that little fence. How does he bring his carbon? Okay, Emir Hashem. Is there a difference between the lamb buying game blemish? No, there's no difference. There is no difference. Once the carbon cannot be brought, whether it died or it has a blemish, if you said Harei Zu, all bets are off. It's this animal. You can't do anything. But if you say Harei Olai, it's my responsibility, then if the animal gets a blemish or the animal dies, you have to replace it with another animal. So a goy, a kusi, they want to bring a carbon olah, a carbon shlomim, a carbon toda as a private offering, which doesn't involve the machzis hashekel. They can bring these offerings. You can accept it from them. Zeh haklal, and here is the general rule. Kol shenidar v'nidav, any carbon that is possible to give as a donation, whether it's called the neder donation or the nedava donation, but you can bring it as a nedava, a carbon toda. Something wonderful happened to a person. He was saved from some potential disaster. He was in the hospital. He was on his deathbed. A miracle happened, and he wants to bring a carbon toda. A guy can do that. It's private. A kusi can do that. It's private. And therefore, he can bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. But let's say a person says, Harei Olai carbon chatas. I will bring a carbon chatas. You can't bring a carbon chatas because you say you're going to bring a carbon chatas. Unless you're required to bring a carbon chatas. Someone was machal Shabbos by mistake. Now, I'm not going to go into Hilchos Shabbos here, which is a life kind of endeavor itself. Excuse me. A carbon chatas is a technical thing in Hilchos Shabbos. Someone walks into a room and flips up the switch on Shabbos because he wasn't thinking at all is not a chatas territory. Chatas territory is someone's walking in his field and he forgets it's Shabbos. He knows that you're not allowed to cut wheat on Shabbos. He knows that. He walks into his field with the full knowledge, according to him, that it's Thursday. He believes it's Thursday, and he intentionally cuts the wheat. He intentionally cuts wheat on Shabbos because he believes sincerely that it's Thursday. That is a korban chatas territory. Or a person walks into his field on Shabbos. He knows that it's Shabbos, and it is Shabbos. But he forgot that you're not allowed to cut wheat on Shabbos. Or there's a whole sugya he never knew you can't cut wheat on Shabbos. He has to bring a korban chatas. Those are the rules of korban chatas are rules. You can't say, I feel bad about talking Lashon Hara, I'm going to bring a korban chatas. You can't bring a korban chatas. This is a problem because it's called chulin ba'azara. If you want to bring a private offering through a donation, neder nedava, ola, ola, you want to bring a toda, shlamim, a mincha, flower offering, these can be done by donation. Achatas, an asham. Imagine someone saying, I'm not a nazir, but I'd like to bring the karbonis of a nazir. You can't do that because that means that they're going to slaughter in the azara chulin. It's your barbecue meat. It's not korban meat. The only animals that can be slaughtered and in the azara are those animals that are kosher, that have the rule of hektish. So if you want to bring a private ola, okay. You want to bring a private shlamim, okay. If we need to bring the public korban tamid, okay, it's hektish. A person walks into the azara and says, I'd like to shech near the mizbeach on my calf because I'm making a barbecue tonight at home. That is a big no-no. That's chulin ba'azara. By the same token, you cannot bring a korban, a private korban, unless it's the kind of korban that is subject to donation. Nidar v'nidav, hare alai or hare zu. That's the only way to do it. A person can't come into the azar and say, I decide I want to bring a private korban tamid today. You can't bring a private korban tamid. You can bring a korban ola. You can't bring a private korban tamid. And these are things that are discussed at the beginning of Maseches Zvachim. The thought process of what is the Kohen thinking while he's shechting the animal? What is the owner thinking while he's shechting the animal? These are major issues in bringing a korban. You can destroy the korban through thought. So zehaklal kol shenidar v'nidav. This is the rule. Anything that is possible to donate, whether through the Hare Zu or Hare Alai, makablen miyadam. You can accept from a goy and you can accept from a kusi. Kol she'ein nidar v'nidar, something that's not subject to donation, ein makablen miyadam, you cannot be makabel from them. And here the chiddush is on top of the korban. If you take a look at the left side of your page, page 7 in the Mishnah Behira, the left side of your page is the Iker Tosas Yantif. The parish of the Tosas Yantif is much longer than it's printed in this Mishnayos. If you have a Yochanan Boaz Mishnayos, the Tosas Yantif is much longer. Many Mishnayos prints created something called Ikar Tosas Yantif, the summary of the Tosas Yantif, and that's what you have in the Mishnah Behira. So if you take a look at the top line, Yud Daled, Kol She'ein, Pirish La Mizbeach, Afal Gav D'Nidav V'Nidav Lebetek Habayis, Ein Makabla Miyadon. When it says Kol She'ein Nidav V'Nidav, that which can't be donated, you can't accept from a kusi and you can't accept from a goy. We just explained the rule. That which can't be donated You can't shecht on the mizbeach, even from a Jew. A Jew can't walk in and say, I'd like to bring a chatas. I want to donate a chatas. You can't donate a chatas. You're either required to bring a chatas for something you did, or you're not. I want to bring a korban nazir. You can't bring a korban nazir. Either you were a nazir or you weren't. So this is true even for a Jew who cannot bring a korban that's not of a donation. Private Jews can bring private korbanos. Only the tzibur from the Maseches HaShekel can bring the public korbanos. So when the Mishnah says there's kol she'ein nida v'nida, this which cannot be donated, you cannot accept from a goy or a kusi. If it can't be donated, it's a chatas, you can't accept it from a Jew either. The Mishnah is telling us a completely different rule here that Tosfos Yontiv explains. Af al gav the nida lebedek habayis. We're talking about a specific kind of case. Take gold or silver. Now read the words of the Mishnah. Kol she'ein nida v'nida, even things that can't be donated to the Mizbeach. You can't bring gold and silver on the Mizbeach as an offering, but you can donate gold and silver to the Bedek HaBayis. Bedek HaBayis is the general upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash needed to be cleaned, fixed. It's called Bedek HaBayis. So gold and silver can't be offered on the Mizbeach, but they can be donated to the Bedek HaBayis, the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. Kol she'ein nida v'nida, that which cannot be donated to the Mizbeach, like gold and silver, even though such things like gold and silver can be donated to the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash for the general upkeep, Bedek HaBayis of the Beis HaMikdash, ein makabel miyada. We don't take such money from goyim, and we don't take such money from kusim. Even general upkeep money. So what do we have? A goy and a kusi cannot donate Maseches HaShekel because they cannot be part of the public offering donation. They cannot bring any korbanos that are obligations, chatas asham. They cannot donate even money to the general upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. How do we know this? B'chein hu mafurish al yedei Ezra. It's a pasuk in Ezra, in chapter 4 of Ezra, when Ezra and Nehemiah were starting to build the second Beis HaMikdash, and people, we've talked about the second Beis HaMikdash at the beginning when it was built, they were collecting pennies. The people that came from Babel to Eretz Yisrael were not the wealthiest Jews, nor were they finest Jews. We talked about this. Many of them were intermarried. They brought their Gentile wives with them to Eretz Yisrael, and they're building the Beis HaMikdash. The wealthier Jews, the finer quote-unquote Jews, remained in Babel. And so it was a bit difficult today. That's a wonderful question. That's what we're getting to, about whether you can accept money from goyim for Jewish institutions. This is exactly the sugya where those who discuss this issue, this is the Mishnah, and there is no, I should have said this when we started the Masechta. The first Masechta we learned, Masechta Midos, is Mishnayos. We learned it very in depth, but there is no Gemara whatsoever on Masechta Midos. We learned Masechta Tamid also quite in depth, but there are a few blot Talmud Bavli on Masechta Tamid. Masechta Shekalim has Gemara, but does not have Bavli. It doesn't have Babylonian Talmud on it, but it does have Talmud Yerushalmi. The Jerusalem Talmud was written on Masechta Shekalim. When Rav Meir Shapiro Zechron Tzadik Levracha set up the Daf Yomi, Masechta Shekalim became part of the Daf Yomi, even though the Daf Yomi is dedicated to finishing Talmud Bavli. Masechta Shekalim was inserted, even though the commentary is from Talmud Yerushalmi. In the Talmud Yerushalmi here, and in the commentaries of the Yerushalmi here on this Mishnah, this exact halachic shaila is raised. Can Gentile money be accepted to help build Jewish institutions? And of course, The Shaila then expands when the Nefesh B'Nefesh started, and there were Gentile Christian organizations donating to bringing Jews to Eretz Yisrael and donating money to Eretz Yisrael. The same question arose, and there were different poskim who had different shittas about that question, but that was an excellent question, Mrs. Zabrowski. This is the sugya where it comes from. V'cheinu mafurish ayidei Ezra shenemar, when the Kusiim wanted to donate money. They're watching Ezra and Nehemiah build the Beis Hamikdash with a group of Jews that came from Bavel. There wasn't much money. And we see this, we saw it in Masechta Midos, that they had to skimp a bit on how they built the second Beis Hamikdash. And later, Hordis built this massive new Beis Hamikdash. But they did not have a tremendous amount of wealth. And so the Kusiim wanted to donate money to build the Beis Hamikdash. Ezra refused to take the money. Shenema, the pasuk says, "Lo lachem v'lanu livnos bayis lelokeinu." We are not going to be partners with you in building the Beis Hamikdash, and he refused their money. Therefore, the halacha is, if a Kusi or Goy wants to bring a private carbon, I'd like to bring a carbon toad I got out of the hospital. Can be done. I'd like to bring a carbon chatas, a carbon asham, cannot be done. I became Tameh, Zav, Zava, Yoledes, a Kosi says that, can't take the carbon. I'd like to give some money to help the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Cannot take that money. And that's this Mishnah. I'm going to give you now a little introduction to tomorrow's Mishnah. The first words are Ve'elu Shechayavin Ba'kolbon. We're going to learn about kolbon. Kolbon, I'm going to use the word kolbon. Kolbon means a little extra money. When you bring your matzah hashekel to the Beis Hamikdash, there's a question in the Mishnah. It's a machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Tanakama, whether you're required to give a kalbon. Kalbon, according to the Chachamim, with whom we paskin like the Chachamim, kalbon means the money changer's fee. We know money changers take a fee, and this is how it worked in those times. If a person, for example, just give me an example, people may understand it, agree with it, but it's just a general idea. A lot of people don't like to walk around, going back to, okay, we'll use the shekel. People don't always like to have 200 shekel bills in Eretz Yisrael. You're in a taxi, the taxi driver doesn't want to take a 200 shekel bill, he doesn't have change, he starts screaming at you. If you knew you're taking a taxi, why didn't you have change? People like right? We want 100 shekel bills, sometimes we want 50 shekel bills. There's a convenience. Now, if you like to count your money at night, so you like a big stack of 200 shekel bills, not a big stack of 50 shekel bills. But getting away from counting your stacks of money, it's more convenient to walk around in your purse or your pocketbook with 50 shekel bills or 100 shekel bills. Everybody's taking 50s and 100s. When you get to the 200s, people start saying, you want to buy flowers for Shabbos, have a 200 shekel bill. He doesn't have change. Then you have to start asking people on the street, you have change of a 200. There is a certain value to having smaller bills than one large bill in this circumstance. So people used to go to money changers in those days, and if they had a shekel, which was a tremendous, in those days, it was a large amount of silver, and you want to buy something, so you walked into your local marketplace and you wanted to buy a piece of fish, you couldn't buy your piece of fish because the seller didn't have change for a shekel. You have to go to the corner of the market, and there was a shulchani, you mentioned, the table man, the man who sat at the table, and you sat at the other side, and you exchanged coins across the table. So first you had to go to the shekel man, the shulchani, the money changer. You would put the shekel, and then he would give you smaller coins. But now he has the shekel, and that's an inconvenient coin for him. So besides giving him a shekel, you gave him a shekel and 20 agurot. We're not getting into questions of ribbis. Anybody that wants to learn, first of all, we're not dealing with a loan here altogether. It's the sale of money. It's not a loan. You're selling money. And that has to do with the whole, the money change issue. If you're changing, if you're buying, are you buying dollars, quote unquote, or there's people say, I'd like to convert shekel to dollars, and some people say, I have shekel, I'd like to buy dollars. Okay, so anyone that's really interested in Hilchos Ribbis, you have a big job to do. You can learn Perigei Zeu Neshech and Bava Metzia and get a very, very good pirush on it because it's head turning. Without getting into issues of ribbis, what just happened was the money changer, the shulchani, had a lot of coins. And those coins have a certain value because this coin can buy a piece of fish, and this coin can buy the grain, and this coin can buy the piece of chicken. But the big shekel can't buy anything because no one wants to change it. So now you gave the money changer a shekel, and he's giving you smaller coins, and now you can go all over the place and buy whatever you need. But now the money changer is stuck with a shekel, and that's not the most convenient thing. So you pay him a fee to take that shekel. Let's say you paid him 20 agurot. And so eventually he gets machzis shekel. He has his own way. Some people want to come and buy the shekel from him. People want to trade in for bigger coins. It's a whole business. In the normal marketplace, you would have to pay a kalbon. You would have to pay a little fee to be able to take a shekel and convert it into a machzis shekel. The same thing is going to happen according to the Chachamim in the Beis Hamikdash. If you want to give the gizbar of the Beis Hamikdash, the one you want to give the treasury, a full shekel, because that's all you have. Now you could go to the marketplace, and in the marketplace you can go to the shulchani and say, I have a shekel, I'd like 2/2 a shekel. What would happen there? The shulchani, the money change, would say, fine, I happen to have 2/2 shekels today. Here are the 2/2 shekels for your shekel. The fee for that is 20 agurot, and you would pay it. If you walk into the Beis Hamikdash and say to the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, here's a shekel, give me back 1/2 a shekel, there's a kalbon issue, and we're going to learn about that in the Mishnah. You can't change a shekel for 2/2 shekels in the Beis Hamikdash for free, when you would have to do that in the marketplace and pay a fee for it. So the fee that you would pay in the marketplace for the exchange is the fee you're going to pay in the Beis Hamikdash. That's one shita. It's the exchange fee. And that's the shita of Chachamim. Rabbi Meir's shita is the kalbon has nothing to do with an exchange fee. And I'm teaching the Mishnah now in kalbon. There are a lot of shitas in kalbon. I'm teaching it the way the Rambam and generally the Mefarshim understand kalbon. The second sheet of Rabbi Meir says the kalbon has nothing to do with an exchange rate. When the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Kisisa to collect a machzis hashekel, the machzis hashekel was a very precise amount in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was so precise that the words in the Torah are Ze Yitnu. Hashem said to Moshe, Ze Yitnu. This is what is to be given. The Gemara comments in several places that there are only 3 places, perhaps 4 places, where the Rebbeinu Shalom said, Ze, it is to be exactly like this. One of those places is the Machzis HaShekel. And the Gemara even tells us, and the Medrash tells us, Kimin Matbeya Shal Eish. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu the coin in a fire. This is the precise Machzis HaShekel. As time went on and the value of silver went up, went down, etc., so there's a question of Hachreya. The question is when you go to the Beis Hamikdash and give the times the second Beis Hamikdash, you brought your Machzis HaShekel, does it have the full value or weight of the Machzis HaShekel that the Rebbeinu Shalom showed Moshe and says, Zeh, this. And in order to make sure you have the right amount being given to the Beis Hamikdash, Reb Meir says you add a kalbon. How much do you add? That will be on page 9 of your Mishnah Behira. How much is a kalbon? Is it 20 agurot, 40 agurot? The Mishnah will discuss it at the end of the perek. But this is the concept of kalbon, which we'll see tomorrow, Bli Neder. According to the Chachamim, kalbon is for the purpose of the exchange fee. According to Reb Meir, the purpose of the kalbon is to make up any lack of weight or value as compared to Moshe Rabbeinu's Machzis HaShekel. Therefore, there's a tremendous difference between the Chachamim and Reb Meir. A person walks into the Beis HaMikdash and says, here's my Machzis HaShekel. I have Machzis HaShekel. You don't have to give me any change. Machzis HaShekel. According to the Chachamim, such a person doesn't pay a kalbon, because the purpose of kalbon is an exchange fee. I'm not asking to exchange anything. Here's your Machzis HaShekel. There is no kalbon in that case. According to Reb Meir, the same person walks into the Beis HaMikdash and says, here's my Machzis HaShekel. They say, where's the 20 agurot for the kalbon? Because the purpose of the kalbon was to make up for a deficiency in weight or value as compared to Moshe Rabbeinu's Machzis HaShekel. So a person that walks in with the Machzis HaShekel, according to the Chachamim who hold the kalbon, is the exchange fee. There is no exchange fee, there is no kalbon. According to Reb Meir, the kalbon is to make up for a deficiency in the value of the Machzis HaShekel or the weight of the Machzis HaShekel. Even if you bring in a Machzis HaShekel, you will still pay a kalbon. How much is the kalbon will be in the last Mishnah of this perek.